Welcome to WTF Fantasy Football. My name is Tony Cincotta, and of course, Jim Day is with me. But Jim, I take off a week, and all of a sudden we got this third guy, a guy named Brian Drake. And Jim, you're about the same age as me. I remember back in the day, Drake's Cakes. So do you think this guy's like a millionaire and we don't know it? And his whole family's been in a bakery, and he's like the spawn of the family because he's been making cupcakes in the background?
Well, I don't know, but look at that nice setup he's got over there, that very professional-looking mic. He's got two big TVs hanging behind him. I don't know. He's got it made over there. Hey, Brian, how you doing tonight?
Gentlemen, how are you? Thanks for having me, Tony and Jim. And yeah, this is just where a married guy of 7 years hangs out, to get away from two small children and a wife to watch a little television. It doesn't help very often. One of these TVs doesn't even work, but it looks pretty damn cool behind me.
Yeah.
If you guys are watching it here live on YouTube, but I got a cold beer. I got some fantasy football talk, and I got an hour to kill with you two gentlemen. So it's going to be a pretty damn good Wednesday night.
See, I'm jealous, Jim. Like, this is a young guy, so he's drinking a beer. Like, back in the day, that was me, and I'd be peeing in a barrel during the show and hoping no one noticed. But when you get older, I'm drinking water and coffee now during the show.
Yeah, it's just a basic fact to try and keep us awake, right, Tony? I'm drinking Mountain Dew for my caffeine intake, so I would.
I've never had a cup of coffee in my entire life. I'm 38 years old.
Really?
I could beat that. I'm 57. I've never had a cup of coffee in my life.
Wow, look at us.
That's amazing, amazing. Well, week one's in the book, people, and I know you don't care about Jim being sterile from Mountain Dew because he's been married 25 years, so he doesn't need to use it anymore. And, we'll get on with the fantasy football. Jim, we're going to start off with something I always like, fact or fiction. And whenever you get week one, people like to go crazy, and people overemphasize week one in most cases. So we're going to try to help the people out.
Ah, sounds good. Sounds good. Let's talk some fact or fiction, and I'll give you one real quick overreaction that happened to me this week in one of my leagues. Somebody offered to trade me Deshaun Jackson for Dalvin Cook because Deshaun Jackson had such a great week. He's such a better player for me to have than Dalvin Cook.
Brian, what do you think about throwing a trade like that after week one to people? Do you feel you're insulting somebody, or do you feel like you should try to do it?
I don't give a damn if I'm insulting somebody. If they're stupid enough to take it, I'm going to throw it out there. And I'm known in my leagues as the guy who loves to trade and is going to send you obnoxious trade offers. There's nothing wrong with that, because once in a while you get a guy who's like, oh man, you know what, Deshaun Jackson, this is the year, man. They're looking good with their new OC, and they take it, and they're out of their mind. So, hey, if you can throw it out there, by all means, the worst thing they're going to do is say no.
No, see, that's not the worst thing, because that guy, I'll never trade with that guy again.
See, but Jim, the worst thing is, and I don't know if it's the worst, but say that trade gets made for whatever reason, right? It pisses off the 8 or 9 other owners in the league. So, Brian, is that worth it to you?
That's what fantasy football is. It's how much can I piss off my friends for 3 months, and then we're going to talk about the one, jack off who won the league because he made a ridiculous trade and everyone's upset about it. But you know what? Come August, they're all back in your garage drinking beer, doing the draft again. That's fantasy football. Who can screw over their friend first?
Jim, I got to be honest. He's right, but that's the reason why I like to play in no trade leagues, because I tell everybody I'm way smarter than them. But once a trade comes involved, there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, really. It is definitely tough. I don't look at it the same way as Brian does when it comes to trading. I like to make fair trades because I like people to come back and want to trade with me again when I need it or when they need it. So I'm not quite so cutthroat as you guys, but it seems to work for me.
All right, everybody at home, you can play along with us. We're going to play fact or fiction. I will make a statement, and I will get from the guys fact or fiction, and you at home can play along with you. I love everybody in the fantasy industry, and of course, Matt Berry is a guy that's paved the way in the industry, but he doesn't give a shit what you think. I actually care, so you're going to play a game with me. Fact or fiction, right here. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Tampa Bay quarterback, makes the Tampa Bay Buccaneers better fantasy options of Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, both our tight ends, Howard and Cameron Brate. Brian, what do you say that Ryan Fitzpatrick makes them better fantasy options than Jameis Winston?
No, that's false. You got to realize too now, most people don't talk about this, but they have a new offensive coordinator calling the plays in Todd Monken. Last year when Dirk Cutter was calling the plays, it was an issue because he sucks. But now they're kind of changing up. Again, it's only 1 week, but now they've got a running game. They've got an improved offensive line. Chris Godwin has taken an extra step now, so you have a legit number 2 out there, so you can kick Deshaun into the slot. So they just have a real offense and a real guy calling plays. I don't think it has anything to do with Fitzpatrick. Jameis was pretty good down the stretch last year, actually, and I think he will be again.
Well, Jim, what's your thoughts before I correct Brian?
Well, I like Fitzpatrick. Look, he always tends to start his years off with strong, hot games early in the season, and then at some point the wheels come off. But, you know, he gives different players better options than Jameis does. Definitely Deshaun Jackson, he likes to take the top off the defense. We saw that Sunday, and that's something Fitzmagic can make happen. So I definitely, you know, there's some players I think he targets more, gets more involved in the game plan than Jameis Winston does.
Here's the thing. I can honestly say that Deshaun Jackson absolutely is a guy that gets a raise from Fitzpatrick. Like when Winston's a quarterback, he doesn't even know Jackson's out on the field. It's crazy. And I'm not a Winston guy. I think that Winston's the old style quarterback. He's the Brett Favre style quarterback where you make a big play every once in a while. The scores were lower back then, but now it's all about completing 67% of your passes to be a top quarterback. I don't think Jameis Winston's ever going to complete over 63% of his passes. He's more of a 57% quarterback. And in today's game where it's more like a video game, I think that Jameis Winston is not going to be a top NFL quarterback. And I think he's severely overrated.
Yeah, the clock is going to strike midnight, and Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to turn back into a pumpkin. He's a journeyman, just kind of also ran quarterback. He has these games once a year, like you mentioned, but I don't see him making that many people better. I think the reason Deshaun did so well was because he played against a terrible secondary, and you have real threats out there. It's not just everyone's going to triple team Mike Evans.
Well, going back to
Goodwin's a really good player on the other side.
Last year, he was better with Fitzpatrick than Winston.
Okay, I mean, he's one guy on that whole offense. I think if you look at everybody as a whole, look at what those tight ends did last year with Jameis Winston. I mean, you had 2 viable tight ends you could start.
Right, that's what I mean. He'll spread it around. He'll get it, you know, more the short to medium range targets with these guys, whereas that's not Fitzpatrick's game. But I will tell you, he's not, you know, I mean, he's had some good years. I mean, look back to 2015 with the Jets, played all 16 games, threw for almost 4,000 yards, had 31 touchdowns to only 15 interceptions. So, I mean, it's not implausible. Look, this is even what came out of the GM's mouth, is saying there's no guarantee that Winston comes back and steps right back into the starting role. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he comes back and he's not starting if Fitzpatrick has another game like this or 2 like this, because this team is really just, they're tired of Winston and the stuff that he pulls off the field and the fact that he's not really a leader in the locker room. He's not really a leader in the huddle. I think all of these things have really gotten to the point where Tampa Bay doesn't view him as their franchise quarterback anymore.
Would you guys start him against Philadelphia this weekend?
What's your other option? That's always my first question.
And to be honest with that, I'd have to have a very poor option to do it. I wouldn't do it, but I'll say this. I picked Cameron Brate in a couple drafts, and I have no problem putting him in my lineup, even going back to a backup quarterback like Fitzpatrick. I don't own Deshaun Jackson or Mike Evans. Last week I did play Mike Evans in daily fantasy. I thought they would have a good matchup, but I thought it would be a high-scoring game, so it came out perfect like that. So I don't think that having Fitzpatrick there makes me say I'm off any of these guys. And most times when we have a backup quarterback, that's how you feel, or you at least think about it.
I'll give you that. Yes, when he comes into the game, it's almost like a Nick Foles type situation where you're not scared of the options anymore. It's kind of just like, all right, they have a professional quarterback. I'm an Eagles fan. Trust me. I tell everybody, Nick Foles isn't the Super Bowl MVP caliber quarterback. He got lucky for 2 games, and let's move on.
It's all about getting lucky. That's why people are watching WTF Fantasy, because they're pretty lucky tonight. And I got another fact or fiction for you. Joe Flacco, the Baltimore Ravens quarterback, is he worthy to be a starting fantasy quarterback based on the number of throws he had in the first half? They came out firing the ball, and Joe Flacco had, in a blowout, he had 25 passes attempts in the first half this week. What's your thoughts on Flacco going forward, Jim? Are the Ravens all of a sudden a passing team?
I don't think they're so much a passing team as they were taking advantage of the Buffalo Bills team. But look, Flacco is playing for his life at this point. He knows they brought in Lamar Jackson to take his job, and he's decided he doesn't want to let that happen. He looks like he's healthy, had a good preseason, came in, had a good first game. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's fighting for, QB maybe 14, 15 by year's end.
Brian, what's your thoughts? I agree with Jim. I think he's right around there, 14, 15, with some upside. But the receivers, we got to see a little more out of them. What's your thoughts on Flacco being fantasy worthy going forward?
These are the best weapons he's had in his entire career, in my opinion. I mean, the guy who threw for as great of a game as it was, he only threw for 236 yards. Yeah, he had 3 touchdowns. If you look at his schedule coming up, Cincinnati, Denver, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, those are good defenses. And if he's only going to be giving me kind of middling numbers, I'm going to go to the waiver wire and I'm going to find a Jared Goff, a Tyrod Taylor, a Case Keenum, somebody like that, and just play the matchups. I don't trust Joe Flacco at all. To me, he's like Andy Dalton.
Can I just interject one point here? You're making notice of his numbers, but that's basically in 3 quarters.
Yeah,
got out the entire 4th quarter.
Buffalo is the second best team in the city of Buffalo, behind like South Buffalo Academy High School. They're awful. There's not even a 32nd team in the NFL.
Right. You know who the most famous resident of Buffalo is?
I would say Dan Dempsey from my fantasy football league, but I don't believe that to be true.
No, it's actually John Wayne Bobbitt.
Ho!
You know what John Wayne Bobbitt was famous for?
I do. And if I ever do anything wrong to my wife, I'll join him in infamy.
Yes, he's from Buffalo, New York. So that's what happens on a bad night in Buffalo. And you wonder why Mac had to get out of there.
That's the problem with Buffalo. And I got a lot of friends. I live in upstate New York in Syracuse, so there's a lot of Bills fans. They have a terrible owner. They have a really bad GM. And the problem with Buffalo, though, is you can't get anybody to come there. As soon as they draft all these young, good defensive players, the instant they're eligible to leave, they all skate because nobody wants to hang out in Western New York all year round. So it's tough. I feel bad for Bills fans, man. They got a raw deal. I don't know if that team's ever going to be legit.
But they got Niagara Falls. I love Niagara Falls.
Fact or fiction? You should never give up on a first-round pick after one game. But should you be concerned about Leonard Fournette's health going forward? Jim, what are your thoughts? Leonard Fournette won the first round of most drafts. He pulls up with a hamstring. He had injuries last year. He had injuries at LSU. What are we seeing from Fournette going forward?
Well, hey, look, I like Fournette, but I think their guide to wanting to get him the ball more this year is what's going to lead to his downfall. I think he's better off as like a 15-touch-a-game guy. Make those big plays. I think you try to force more than that to him, and I think you start running into issues. Look, the other mainly first-round running back I would be even more afraid of right now is Kareem Hunt, because one thing we did see from Pat Mahomes this week is he doesn't like to check down. He doesn't want to think about throwing those 5-yard passes. He wants to throw 50-yard passes pretty much every time he drops back.
Brian, I got to tell you, I agree with Jim on the Kareem Hunt. The Leonard Fournette situation is going to be tricky, and we're going to talk about it a little later in the show. I saw Leonard Fournette today on the news, the local news. I'm in Jacksonville. Leonard was walking around fine, so I don't know what that means for the game Sunday and how you go about putting Fournette in the lineup or how much confidence you have into TJ Yeldon. But I am more concerned about Hunt than Fournette at this point. And the reason being, Spencer Ware played a lot in that game.
Yeah, I don't understand why Leonard Fournette was getting all of the hype and praise he was getting in the pre-draft season. I listen to a lot of fantasy talking heads out there, and there were people touting Leonard Fournette as like a top 5 pick. And I'm like, what are we talking about? This is a guy who doesn't catch any passes. This is a guy, he's really game script specific. Luckily, he's on a good team with a great defense, but he's not really going to catch that many passes out there and add to anything, which is where Kareem Hunt gained his value. So I agree with you guys. Kareem Hunt, he should come through, but I'm petrified if I'm one of his owners because it's just not in his quarterback's DNA to check the ball down. He's not advanced yet in his development as a quarterback. So he's going to be pushing the ball down the field. It seems like he's locked on Tyreek Hill. Even Sammy Watkins is a guy who's like on the side of a milk carton right now. So getting back to the original point, should you be concerned about Leonard Fournette? I'm going to say that's true-ish. His injuries, he's really only had an ankle injury in his NFL career. But yeah, he's had multiple times with that. I'm not as concerned about this, but you drafted the guy high. Hopefully you went and got Yeldon as a backup, and there's really nothing you can do about it. If he plays, he starts for you.
I got to be honest, Jim. I have Fournette on a few teams, and I don't have Yeldon. I have Corey Grant. And I was surprised he didn't play as much. Last year, though, Corey Grant did well in that game against the New England Patriots. So I think this Sunday is going to be interesting. A little later in the show, though, I will talk about my player of the week, and it'll probably be a Jacksonville Jaguar.
Oh, there you go. Well, look, the one thing they're saying so far is it looks like Fournette is going to play. They expect him to play. Coach said he doesn't care if he doesn't practice all week. He can still go on Sunday. So one of the local beat writers, I'm sorry I didn't get the name real quick, definitely thought that Fournette would be a go this week. But, once it comes to hamstring injuries, it's so easy to restrain that hamstring that, man, it's definitely got to be a concern. I'm sure we're going to get questions about whether or not people should be starting Yeldon over.
That's my question. Yeah, Brian, I got two questions then. Brian.
Yep.
Fournette's active.
Mm-hmm.
Put him in your lineup.
Yep.
Second, if you have TJ Yeldon on your roster, do you put him in your roster even if you look in Fournette's active?
Yeah, TJ Yeldon's a guy who should never leave your roster this year unless crazy things happen because he is one injury away from being a top 12 running back in fantasy. So he's going to sit on your roster as the golden lottery ticket all year long. But, if Leonard Fournette's active and they say he's starting, you have to put him in your lineup because he's such a threat to score. If he just falls into the end zone and scores a touchdown, he made his value for the day. So it's just one of those things with fantasy. It's out of our hands. If he's active, he's got the talent, he's got the scheme and the role, you put him in, you hope for the best, but never get rid of Yeldon this year.
You listen to WTF Fantasy. We're breaking down everything that happened in Week 1, getting you ready for Week 2, and we're a little fired up. And the New England Patriots are playing the Jacksonville Jaguars this week, and people in Jacksonville are fired up. I got to tell you what, the Patriots, all of a sudden Week 1 comes out. They have this guy that couldn't make it in Indianapolis named Philip Dorsett. He has thrown 7 passes, Jim. He catches 7 passes. He was a first-round pick. The Colts gave up on him. All of a sudden, he's in New England. Should Philip Dorsett be on every roster out there in fantasy football and not be on a waiver wire?
If his coach was and had a different name than Bill Belichick, I'd be right there with you. The fact that his coach is Bill Belichick, and I keep saying this, and I'm going to keep saying this, people. He doesn't care about your fantasy team, so he's going to do what he thinks is going to give him the best way to win. And everybody going into last week, everybody was expecting Chris Hogan to be the guy that really stepped in and really was going to have a huge game, especially how he did last year before getting injured. Everybody expected big things, and we didn't see anything from Hogan in Week 1. And I think that was on purpose by Belichick to use Hogan as a decoy so he could get some of these other receivers involved in the game plan, take the defense away. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Dorsett doesn't see a target this week and Hogan gets everything. So man, the only player I want on New England is Gronkowski.
Not Tom Brady?
No, I don't draft quarterbacks early, so no Tom Brady. I want Gronkowski. He's the only one I'll draft early, and I'll be happy with it every time.
Brian, what's your thoughts on Philip Dorsett? Does he belong on a roster in every league?
Anybody who's getting 7 targets a game from Tom Brady deserves to be on your roster. And the defense isn't going to focus on him. At best, he's the third option a defensive coordinator is going to game plan for. And you got to think this week against Jacksonville, the only real weakness the Jags have is they have a new slot corner.
Yeah.
So he's probably the guy you want to attack. I'm not sure that Dorsett's going to run more routes in the slot. Whichever guy they put in there, hell, it could be James White. We don't know. That's the guy who's going to be productive this week, because I don't see any of those guys on New England beating the outside corners for Jacksonville. It's not going to happen, but you're going to have after this another 2 games without Edelman. So you've got an opportunity to maybe buy low. Maybe somebody drops Dorsett after he puts up a goose egg this week. So just be aware. You're going to have a few weeks out here before Edelman comes back. Get him in a lineup. He'll have better days, but this weekend probably won't be the one.
You know what? I actually would definitely target him. They went and grabbed him last year, and it was in the middle of the season, and I think they went out and grabbed him. This year they had the offseason to work and came there. I think whatever it is, Bill Belichick likes this guy.
Yeah, I mean, he came in like the last week of August, right, in that Brissett trade.
Yeah.
He didn't know the offense.
Yeah. Jim, I'm thinking they like this guy.
Well, I think they like this guy too, but I just can't trust Belichick. It has nothing to do with Dorsett. Look, you know, this is the same team that also just went out and signed Corey Coleman. So obviously there's still things they're not happy with here. It has nothing to do with the players and everything to do with the coach. He is such a bastard when it comes to trying to figure out what his offense is going to do on any given week.
Next up, fact or fiction, my final one. And I got to tell you, this guy, from a fantasy perspective, is a way better fantasy player than he is an NFL quarterback. So I'm sort of throwing out my opinion on him right away. Did Tyrod Taylor, the Cleveland Browns quarterback, do enough to keep his job when they spent the first pick in the draft on Baker Mayfield? Jim, what's your thoughts?
I think he did not. He had a terrible game. I mean, he ended up with good fantasy points, especially with that nice running touchdown. And that was a nice running touchdown, no doubt. He played a lot better in the second half than he did in the first, which was, I mean, nothing in the first. In the first half, it was just terrible business by him. But I don't think he did. He needs to step it up to the next point. Otherwise, we will indeed see Baker Mayfield. Look, right now, this team, they were probably celebrating Sunday night because they didn't lose. But this is a team that should have won that game. They had this game. They should have won this game, and they didn't. And just another reason why you Jackson just needs to go.
I totally agree. I think this game was definitely the epitome of the Cleveland Browns. They did everything they could win, and they still didn't win in this game. Tyrod Taylor, I thought Jim put it perfectly. The fantasy numbers look good. If you watch this game, I don't know how you could say this guy belongs as the helm of any NFL franchise. I got to ask you, Brian, what's your thoughts?
Full disclosure, 10 minutes before we went on the air, I added Tyrod Taylor to my main fantasy team because I start Jared Goff. So I'm like, you know what? He's got a great matchup. I got to just get this guy on my side anyways. Here's all you need to know about Tyrod Taylor. The Buffalo Bills hadn't made the playoffs in over 20 years. They made the playoffs last year. Tyrod Taylor was the quarterback. They got rid of him. That's all you need to know. He is very inaccurate in the pocket. He is poor at reading progressions. He never finds anyone else down the field. He can't dump the ball off. Look what we were talking about with Patrick Mahomes. Throws a great deep ball, can run around a little bit, but all the intermediate guys suffer. So the other thing with Tyrod Taylor, he played 5 quarters of football, all right? And he completed 15 passes.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be Baker Mayfield time sooner than later, and I'm ready to jump on you, Baker, on the waiver wire when you're ready, buddy. But it's killing David Njoku. It's killing Duke Johnson. So I'll be doing cartwheels when Baker Mayfield's starting for me in fantasy in 2 weeks.
I'll tell you the one thing, though, I didn't watch in this game is that Jarvis Landry is the real deal. Like, you know, anyone that wondered if this guy was just a PPR fantasy guy playing Miami and throwing the ball, Jarvis Landry is a real deal, Jim.
Anybody who thought that in the first place, considering Ryan Tannehill was the guy throwing him the ball, is an idiot. This kid is the real deal. I put him right up there with OBJ talent-wise. You know, he's had numbers. He actually had more receptions over the start of his career than OBJ did. So he is a reception hoarder. He's going to continue to be that guy. He's a leader in on the team in the locker room. We've seen that on the TV show. So, you know, he's out there to play football, and he's doing his best to do that. And he's doing it without really stirring up any negative controversy. So I'm all gung-ho for him. I always have been. And one of the things that made me crazy during draft season was people talking about drafting Amari Cooper before him. And, I couldn't shake my head fast enough. I couldn't yell and scream loud enough that was the stupidest thing in the world. And I'm not basing it on just this week. Amari Cooper is like the boom or bust player of the century in the 4 years he's been in the league. One of the great stats is in his 4 years, in almost 60% of his games, he hasn't even gotten enough fantasy points to finish as the bottom of a wide receiver 2. And people are drafting him in the 3rd round in some cases. Just idiotic. I know his year-end numbers usually look okay, but when you start having somebody that's that inconsistent, there's no way I want to draft him that early.
Jim, before we move on, one of the things is that you created a great Facebook page that we all belong to, and all day long, this fantasy football talk. And we have some questions we're going to answer right now in the show based on the fantasy football chat room you created. Let everybody know where it is.
Well, it's just called Fantasy Football Talk, and man, people just keep coming out of the woodwork to join. I'm pretty sure I got to approve probably about 20, 25 people a day that want to get in. I'm not sure where the heck they're coming from anymore, but they just keep coming. At some point soon, though, I may even think about capping it off because it's really good. It's really busy. Nobody's being an idiot. Everybody's helping each other out, and that's what kind of was the intention. But at some point, you got to worry about oversaturation.
Brian, before I turn it over to you to talk about some of the questions I asked in the chat room, everybody knows who I am. Everybody knows who Jim is. So, Brian, where were you conceived?
I was born in a sweet little town here called Syracuse, New York. I live here in upstate New York. Most people know us for our college basketball team because our college football team is god-awful. But, yeah, I live here in Syracuse, wife, 2 kids, selling booze as a trade by day and talking fantasy with fun guys like you at night. And, you can follow me on Twitter at Drake Fantasy. I tried to get Hate the Drake and all that, but it was taken. There's no good Twitter handles anymore. Drake Fantasy is pretty lame, but you know what? It gets to the point. People can understand it.
Well, that's okay with me. If you use an underscore, though, that's not okay with me.
No, don't do that.
I always try to teach the young guys in fantasy, if you use an underscore, just your career's over.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's see here. I can't believe this is really a question, but Dustin Scott asks, can only play 2, Zeke Elliott, Christian McCaffrey, and then he goes on with Dion Lewis and just says Thompson.
Chris Thompson.
Chris Thompson.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Chris Thompson. Not really sure why he needed to mention those other 2 names, but go ahead.
Yeah, really. Why go past the first 2? There's really no need to continue. I like the other 2. They had great first weeks and 2 guys that I have quite a few shares of, but there's no way I'm taking those first 2 out of any lineup.
Yeah, I've got, you know what, and I'm a Christian McCaffrey guy, but I'm just going Zeke Elliott and going back to the well. The Dallas offensive line is not as good as they've been the past few years, but he just gets too much of the lion's share of the offense, and you can't chalk up that one bad game. I'm going back to the well with Zeke Elliott every time.
I love questions like this because I'm all about roster management, and a lot of times when people read fantasy advice or they listen to all these shows, it's just like, oh, add this guy, blah, blah, blah. But there's a consequence to that. You have to drop someone from your roster. And that's something that we kind of always forget about on this side of the microphone. So this guy's a great question. Should I drop Sammy Watkins for Tyler Lockett? Jim.
Ooh, you know what? I so much want to say yes. I am not a Sammy Watkins guy. Never have been. He's a guy who's got a load of talent, just can't ever seem to put it together wherever he goes. And we already saw this preseason that he was having a hard time coming to any kind of rapport with Mahomes. We saw it in week 1 again. I mean, Hill is the guy. Mahomes is looking for Hill every time he drops back, and I'm not sure that's going to change anytime soon. Lockett, I like Lockett's talent, but he's a boomer bust guy. I do like him a little bit more with Baldwin being out. They'll use him a lot in the slot, which I think definitely lends to him getting more targets. But he's a boomer bust guy too. It's a tough decision for me, but I think because of the quarterback throwing him the ball and Doug Baldwin being out for a while, I think I would take Lockett over him. I am not a Sammy guy.
All right, so this is where I separate myself from your average fantasy analyst because I don't get too high on myself and say, you know what? If you want to flip a coin on this one, go ahead, do it. Because whichever one you like better here. Because I agree with Jim that I would go Tyler Lockett myself. I think that when we look at Sammy Watkins, we look at a kid that was a good athlete that's been have foot injuries and never ever progress into anything at any time. Tyler Lockett, because of Doug Baldwin not there, gets put in his natural position, I think, in the slot. I think there's an upside there. So I would go Tyler Lockett. But if you want Sammy Watkins, I'm not going to call you a fool, Jim. I think they can flip a coin on this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wouldn't call anybody a fool either. It's just my personal preference. That's all.
What I like to do in situations like that is Sammy Watkins is one of these guys with a name. I'm going to shop him around to everybody in my league and maybe package him with somebody else before I just straight up drop him, because there's guys in your league who maybe not pay much attention as you do. And if you can put him together and say, hey, listen, man, I see you've got, I don't know, Marquise Goodwin. I'll give you Sammy Watkins and, I don't know, Alfred Morris. You know, just something like that. Just throw him in. You know, see if you can get rid of him that way to upgrade your roster. Dewan Adams asks, and it's starting to get crazy, folks, with this James Conner stuff. I was offered Gronk for James Conner. Your thoughts? What the? Get me in this league.
Well, hey, no, like I said, I've seen it too. It's just, you know, look, there is a very good chance that Bell sits out till week 10. There just is at this point. He knows he's not going to get any big money from Pittsburgh. He knows he's worried about next year's contract, and he wants to stay healthy for that. So if that's the case, and you get 10 weeks out of Conner, those are pretty damn good numbers. But you give me Gronk every time, I'm going to take freaking Gronk.
All right. I don't think this is a crazy question because of the whole aspect of it. Running backs are hard to come by. You got a kid in Pittsburgh that they go through the running backs for their offense. So I understand this. But there's no way Le'Veon Bell sits out to week 10. I've thought about this today. You're looking at about $800,000 a game. So even if he doesn't think he's going to get the money that he's going to get next year, if you throw away 8 to 9 million, you never make that money up. I think he comes back by week 4.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. He's holding out for more money. Why are you giving money away? It doesn't make sense. So if somebody wants to take this James Conner nonsense to the next level, by all means, take advantage of him. Here's a guy who just recently posted to the group, Stephen Buster Norris. Appreciate you putting the middle name in there. PPR. Okay. Who's he putting here? Barber or Jonathan Williams in Green Bay.
Oh, so yeah, okay. So you're talking about
Peyton Barber
okay,
and Jonathan Williams.
Not Jonathan Williams.
Jonathan Williams.
No.
What did he write? He's put J. Will.
Yeah, Jamal Williams. It took me a second too. Sorry, guys. Look, I'm not a Jamal Williams fan either. I just again too many backs in that backfield for me to like. So I tend to stay away. What was the other choice?
Peyton Barber.
God, I don't like him either.
I don't like him, but I'm going to the guy with the most touches, Jim, and I think it's Peyton Barber.
Yeah, I agree with you, but man, basically in a situation like this, I'd tell him punt.
Well, Jim, this is almost like what would you rather have, crotch rot or poison ivy on your tongue?
Ooh, but imagine. No, never mind. I can't say that live on radio. No, yeah, I don't know. I don't want either one of them, to be honest. But if I had to take one, it would definitely be Peyton Barber. Ronald Jones at this point is done for this season, I have to imagine. Because the one thing I keep saying, if you're a healthy scratch in week 1, after the preseason he's had and everything, you don't get practice reps after that. They can't afford to. They got to give it to the guys that are going to be on the field, the guys that are going to play every week. And if you don't get practice reps, there's no way for you to get back into that starting lineup.
You're listening to WTF Fantasy Football Podcast with Tony Cincotta, Jim Day. I am Brian Drake, and we're talking about the posts in our fantasy football Facebook forum that Jim Day has created for us. And a new member here, we're going to give him some love. Bo Nuttall just posted this today. So he's got an interesting question here. Alex Collins versus Cincinnati, or my brother from another mother, Kenyon Drake versus the Jets?
Damn. I like this question. I am going to go with Kenyon Drake against the Jets. I don't think the Jets' defense is everything that it was cracked up to be in week one. I think a lot of people there. I think Kenyon Drake's a guy that's a 20-touch guy in a contest. I'm going to go there, Jim.
I'm not quite so sure I'm ready to give Kenyon Drake 20 touches when they're ready to give Gore as many as they gave him last week.
I couldn't believe it last week, and I'm still not wanting to believe it, Jim. Maybe
you got to believe it.
I'm not believing it.
This team still likes Frank Gore, and he showed last week he could still get it done. He doesn't care how old he is. Look, for me, I like Collins this week. First of all, Kenneth Dixon just went on IR. Yeah. So they're going to have to use him. He got hurt last week because of the fumble. They benched him for a while. And then by the time they were ready to bring him back in, the game was out of hand. So they said, screw it, stay on the bench. This week, they're going to need him. I think they get him highly involved in this close divisional matchup. And I think he sees a ton of touches in this one. So I like Alex Collins a lot more this week.
I don't want to overreact to one game, but Alex Collins has fumbled throughout his career. I like Collins a lot because I thought he was going a little too late as far as drafts go, and I wouldn't give up on him. But the one bugaboo is the coughing it up, and we don't know. They've had some backs there. We don't know how long the leash is in Baltimore.
Well, right now it's got to be a little longer than it was last week because they are one less running back. So, Dixon was the guy that would have taken over if they got tired of Collins without him there. Buck Allen is what he is. He's a pass-catching back. He'll do a little bit of this and do a little bit of that. But Collins is the guy who can, do more, get more big plays out of it. I think they have to use him this week.
I love me some Buck Allen. I had him last year, man. He was just really productive. I'm not opposed to him at all. Let's go to Alfredo Mansour, another new member to the group. Should I start Mahomes versus the Steelers or Deshaun Watson versus the Titans, Tony?
All right, so I thought Deshaun Watson might have been the most overrated quarterback except for Jimmy Garoppolo coming into the season. I thought both those guys played well last year over such a small sample size that people were crazy. But when I look at this matchup and I look at Deshaun's weapons, I'm going back to Deshaun Watson in this one. I look at that New England Patriots defense. They got the heat on them. The Houston Texans offensive line is terrible, and that's something people are going to be worried about. But I don't think this defense will get to them.
Look, I'm going to go the opposite way, and for one reason only. Deshaun Watson looked incredibly bad all preseason. He looked incredibly bad last week. You know what? He's on my bench until he gets back out there and shows anything of what he showed last year to me for one game before I even think about putting him back in the starting lineup. I just can't do it.
Jim, do you doubt his ability now, or do you think it's an injury situation?
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a confidence thing. Maybe it's just him needing more time to get ready to go and just didn't have it this preseason. This preseason was definitely a little different than others we saw because, after those first couple of big injuries right at the beginning, it seemed like teams didn't want to play any of their starters at all together. And there were only a couple of teams where their starters actually saw some work in this season, even in the game 3 that, normally is the game where we get to see the starters. And we didn't see that this year. So I think a lot of these teams are just rusty. They haven't played together. But like I said, he was so bad in preseason that right now I need to see him perform in one game before I'm willing to throw him back in. Even if he goes out and has that great game and he's not in my starting lineup, I'll live with that.
Let me give you one more here. Brian in Syracuse asks, Jared Goff versus Arizona or Tyrod Taylor versus the Saints?
I think the Saints D was an aberration last week. I don't think they play that bad again this week. I'm sticking with Goff. He's got too many weapons. I know he's still making a few mistakes here and there, but I like his overall game plan. I love his weapons. Until Tyrod can complete more passes and actually get his players involved, which it might happen this week because they're going to start Gordon. They're going to get him more involved, I believe, in this one. And that should help Tyrod or Tyrod, whatever you want to say. I don't care. But for me, I think I'm going to go with Goff.
Here's the problem. I'm going to go with Goff and because I feel comfortable, but it might not be the right choice. And here's the reason why Goff I get scared of. Goff does not get the amount of throws that you need to be an elite fantasy quarterback.
That's what's scaring me.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Or I mean,
so you're
Brian
talking
from
about
Syracuse,
you're going to start a guy who completed 15 passes.
Yeah.
But he ran for 75 yards too. I mean, that's the upside.
Yeah.
Well, that is the upside. But if he doesn't score that touchdown, then that 7 points isn't enough to push him over the top.
But Jim, here's the problem I have with, I think going back, and this is off the top of my head, Jared Goff had like 6 games where he threw less than 30 passes. When you're playing fantasy, those lack of numbers and then not getting rushing numbers kills you from fantasy. So even when Jared Goff's at the top of his game, he just doesn't throw enough.
Well, look at it from a different point of view. He threw he completed almost as many passes to his one running back that Tyrod completed to his whole team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna flip a coin, like Cincotta said there, and that's what I'm gonna do here. You know what? When you're dealing in the low end like that, and there's probably a lot of people out there who are, you just kind of got to get lucky a little bit. You look at the matchups, you say, all right, let's see this defense, weather conditions, what's the game flow probably going to be like. You make a choice and you just let it fly. You can't, beat yourself up too much over it because you didn't invest anything in the position. So whatever you get, you get.
I wouldn't have the balls to play Tyrod Taylor. I would end up playing Jared Goff, but that's the one concern I had about him. Like, I think the kid's going to be a good quarterback, and I think they have a chance of being a Super Bowl, and I think he can be a quarterback to lead them there. But based on their offense, that's the problem you have to look at. I'm looking at it last year, right, and I'm saying, damn. You look at it, he had a game against Indianapolis, 29 throws, Jacksonville, 21 throws, 22 against the Giants, 26 against Philly, 26 against San Francisco, 24 against the Redskins. When we're talking about elite quarterback numbers, there's no way you can get them when you only throw the ball that many times.
Yeah, but you're not talking about him facing off against an elite quarterback. You're talking about facing him off against Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah, but Tyrod gets that extra touchdown every week because he runs from the pocket. Now, there's a pretty good chance that Tyrod's going to get replaced in the third quarter, which will never happen with Jared Goff, and that's why it makes, to me, the play is Jared Goff.
That would kill you there. You start a guy and he gets benched. Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
I don't see any upside with Taylor, and it might be 18-16, so that's why I would go with Goff.
Good question, Brian in Syracuse. Thanks for listening.
Hey, I got one of my own too. Since you got one in, I got a trade offer on the table to me because I lost Seattle Baldwin, and that hurt me a lot. I have a wealth of running backs in this one league, so a guy offered me T.Y. Hilton and Kenyon Drake for Dalvin Cook and Jamison Crowder. What say you guys on that? Like, I definitely have enough running back depth that I can withstand losing Dalvin Cook. I won't like it. I love Dalvin Cook, but my wide receivers definitely need a step up. So what would you guys say to that?
Say that again?
It was Kenyon Drake and T.Y. Hilton I would be getting, but I'm giving up Dalvin Cook and Jamison Crowder.
I wouldn't do that trade because even when you have the running back depth, I can get more for Dalvin Cook. I think if I shop him around. And I think Jamison Crowder actually in that offense, it looked like Alex Smith. That was his guy, other than Chris Thompson being the targeted wide receiver, that I would have to stick with those two.
Actually, Doxson had a lot more targets than Crowder had, which amazed me, but he did. He had a ton more targets than Crowder had.
I'm asking this guy to throw somebody else in, see what else he can do, because you're looking at a first or second round pick in Dalvin Cook. T.Y. Hilton and Kenyon Drake are third, fourth round picks. Jamison Crowder probably got in like the 6th or 7th. So if there's a first, second round guy in the deal, like, you got to be getting something really good back. I mean, the two guys, T.Y. and Drake, are solid players, mind you, but they're on bad teams. So you kind of want to invest in good guys and good offenses, and you're giving away two guys in probably better offenses than you're getting back.
Well, again, Kenyon Drake on this team, Kenyon Drake probably won't even see my starting lineup. I'll be totally honest. But I've sent them out to a bunch of other owners trying to get a better wide receiver and not. To me, the real question becomes, how good is Hilton if Luck continues to be a dink and duck quarterback, because that's what we saw out of him in week 1. That's what we saw out of him all preseason. I mean, his yards per attempt in week 1 were 6 yards. That's the lowest in his career.
I think this owner is doing something smart. Then he's trying to get something on the name of T.Y. Hilton.
Well, it's not that I don't like T.Y. Hilton. I'm more worried about Luck than T.Y. Hilton, because if Luck is healthy, then T.Y. Hilton is, to me, a top 10 wide receiver all year.
I'll tell you what, based on what we saw in preseason, and even the first game, he put up good numbers. Andrew Luck does not look like the same quarterback. No,
and that's what's scaring me about it, and that's what I keep coming back to, is he definitely looks like all of a sudden he's going to be a dink and dunk quarterback, as we saw by his use of Nyheim Hines. Okay, fair enough. Let's keep going. That's kind of where I keep coming back to too, but I do want some wide receiver help, and if that's not going to be the case, I'll have to live with it.
Jim, how do you figure out you need wide receiver help when you have 132 teams?
I actually have 173 teams, but I have a crazy big Excel spreadsheet that kind of tells me.
Holy smokes.
We got a couple news items that, of course, are out there. Aaron Rodgers unsure of week 2 status. Brian, is there any chance that if Aaron Rodgers was unable to go this week, that Deshaun Kaiser would be fantasy worthy?
No way. No way. I'm not putting that dumpster fire in my lineup. You got word also today that Devontae Adams has a bum shoulder, landed on it wrong. They can't run the football at all. Randall Cobb's 200 years old. If Aaron Rodgers isn't in that lineup, head for Z Hills.
Here was a great stat that I got off of Twitter yesterday from Scott Barrett DFB on Twitter. And if you don't follow him, you really should. He always puts out some great stats. From 2015 through 2017, Randall Cobb was Aaron Rodgers' most targeted receiver when under shotgun, 17.4%, but was his third most targeted receiver on not shotgun throws, 15.3%. Last week, Rodgers was in the shotgun on 22 of his 23 plays after injury.
Well, yeah, he has to be, because he couldn't move.
But if that continues, if Rodgers continues to play and is in the shotgun, then all of a sudden Cobb value definitely goes back up because of this stat. I would imagine is a good play. As we saw last week, Cobb was the guy he was looking for a lot out of the shotgun. So that trend may very well continue. The thing I find really amazing is, Vegas has no line whatsoever on this game or the Tennessee game yet, because I'm pretty sure they're waiting to find out as much as they can about Rodgers and Mariota starting this week.
Based on what I saw today, it appears that Mariota will play in that contest this week. But it only took one game, and I thought this would happen. John Gruden today called out Derek and David Carr. He called them both out for missing throws. It's an amazing situation. I don't believe Carr is his quarterback long term.
I don't get this. Like a year or so ago, this guy looked like he was going to be an MVP of the league. And now he can't find anybody open. He's throwing the ball away from a clean pocket. It doesn't make sense. I think there's a major disconnect, and the players are upset about the Mac trade, or the Mac trade. And you saw what they kind of posted on Twitter, and guys were upset about it. So when you lose the locker room like that a week into the damn season, that's bad news.
Well, look, let's face it. I think there's also a confidence issue here. He lost a lot of confidence last year. He needs to build it back up. Unfortunately, his team is going to pay for it until it happens.
Yeah, that's not going to be a good situation with the Raiders this year. Also, a report that Rex Burkhead was put in concussion protocol. The Patriots, the running back situation, always crazy with the Patriots. I don't see them running against Jacksonville. This just means more targets for James White to me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I love James White this week. I definitely think he's a big play in this one.
James White all day. And if there's a guy in fantasy I'm trying to get on more and more teams, and it's Sony Michel. I think as the season goes on, we're going to be talking about him as a top 15 running back. Just got to get healthy. They draft him in the first round for a reason. He's a cheaper Dion Lewis. They're going to play him. None of these other guys can stay healthy. Burkhead has never been able to do so in his career. So Sony Michel's a guy. He's not going to really do it this week, But down the road, that's a guy, please go out and get him on the cheap while his owner is upset because he's not playing.
Nothing went well for the Arizona Cardinals this week. David Johnson limited in practice today with a back injury. Jim, if no David Johnson for whatever reason, anyone at running back pique your interest?
Well, Chase Edmonds is, I think, is a very good backup. I think this kid is going to be a star someday if he ever gets a chance. Unfortunately, he is locked up behind Johnson after Johnson signed his big long-term contract. So he's going to need Johnson to get injured for him to get any kind of playing time on a consistent basis. So, but I do like him. I think he could do stuff. To me, the bigger worry is whether Sam Bradford can actually play this game anymore.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I was shocked that he was going to be the starting quarterback, and a lot of it was because of Rosen's injuries in the preseason, but I don't think he has anything left.
But if you're Sam Bradford with the money you've made in your career, do you really care?
No.
Like, you know what? I'm going to play 2 games. I'm going to go hang out here in Arizona, drink some Mai Tais by the pool. Oh, yeah, shoulder hurts again. Sleeves are too long. You know, who cares? But no, I'm not playing anybody behind that, you know, piece of trash offensive line. That's a recipe for disaster. Stay away.
It's amazing, though. But here's the thing with Sam Bradford. You can't fault anything he do because all of us would take all that money he's been paid all these times, right? And he just looks like he doesn't care. He looks like he's, you know, he's got a good will.
He could be a backup quarterback in the NFL for another 10 years if he wanted to, just because of his ball placement.
Absolutely. And he'd still be making, you know, while not maybe millions per year, he'd still be making quite a bit more than any of us. How's that?
Absolutely. A guy that's continuing to get it done. Jets wide receiver Jermaine Kearse practicing in full this week. I got to tell you what, you talk about one of the surprises of week 1. The Jets, Jets, Jets. We had a situation where the quarterback goes back to pass, his first touchdown pass, of course, of his career, and it went the wrong way, but it was still a touchdown pass. And the Jets look good. Quincy Enunwa looks like the guy there. Of course, Robbie Anderson coming off a year. I had Jermaine Kearse on a couple teams last year, and he definitely lit it up a couple times. What's going to happen with his Jets receivers here? And do you love this offense? Isaiah Corral, Bilal Powell. All of a sudden, Jim, do they have weapons in Jetland?
Well, look, Crowell may very well not do that again for the rest of the season. 2 touchdowns. Let's face facts. I mean, he's very up and down. He's going to get you some. He's not. I like Powell. He's a guy, you know, could do a little bit of everything. Another one of those guys. But for some reason, the Jets don't like him as much as we do. Somewhere in there's a disconnect. Look, Kearse did well last year when he was in the slot. The Nun was in the slot now. Kearse's injury probably couldn't have come at a worse time trying to build a rapport with a rookie quarterback. Onunwa did step in at that right time and worked a lot with Darnold, and Darnold looked for him a ton. Didn't look for Robbie Anderson very much at all. He was really locked in on Onunwa, and then if that continues, then Onunwa is going to be PPR gold all year. But it's really going to depend on whether or not they keep him in the slot and keep Kearse outside all year, or if they're constantly switching them around.
Brian, I got to be honest. I'm still a Bilal Powell man over Isaiah Crowell. Powell did get the start. I think the Jets, even though they put up 48 points, are not going to be ahead in most games. Like Powell stays on the field more. What do you say about the Jets fantasy options?
Well, a week ago, I sat here with Mr. Jim Day, and we went over the Fighting Chance fantasy article on waiver wire pickup of the year, and somebody picked a guy named Quincy Enunwa. I'm 1 for 1, Jim. I'm 1 for 1. I got one. But, you know, he's going to fill that role of kind of tight end because Darnold loves that short to intermediate throw. He did make one play down the field to Robbie Anderson, who was really good last year. I think he was like a top 15 receiver. Yep. So, I mean, any of those receivers I think are kind of going to be hit or miss, and D coordinators are going to figure out, okay, we got to cover Enunwa here. Let's make him try to throw the ball over the top. Nobody can be comfortable starting either of those running backs. I don't care. Crowell has got to break something long. Otherwise, he's going to give you 6 points every week. So you just can't feel good about those guys. They're more bye-week fill-in desperation because of an injury play.
One of the guys that was the talk about all the preseason is where do you draft Will Fuller? He did not play in week 1. Looks like he'll play week 2. We saw an erratic Deshaun Watson. Jim, what's the story on Will Fuller?
Well, look, you even got Hopkins, who's a little banged up now too. So this it's going to be interesting to see which one of them plays, or if both of them play. I think that helps Watson, but again, Watson just looked lost last week to me. He just didn't look like the same guy we saw under center last year. I don't think it's because he's worried about the leg. I think he's thinking more than he did last year, where he just went out and played the game. I think they're trying to push more down, on him to learn and to do. And until you start getting past that stuff where you're thinking more than playing, then you start to see these hesitations. And that's what I think we're seeing with him now. I think we're just seeing a little bit of that sophomore slump starting out. And, at this point in time, like I said earlier, I want to see him have a good game before I'm ready to put him back in my lineup.
Did either of you saw Brandon Marshall make a touchdown catch and say, man, I got to get him off the waiver wire?
I drafted Brandon Marshall last year early, and my buddies still bust my balls about it. So when I saw him on the waiver wire last night, I go, there's no goddamn way I'm picking Brandon Marshall up. I don't care what he does out there. I'm letting this guy go. I'm going to say he's cooked. But you know what? Somebody's got to catch the ball. If you need a receiver, geez, Russell Wilson makes guys like Will Dissly look viable. So, if you need a third receiver, a flex in a desperate time, why the hell not?
Hey, I went out and grabbed him. And look, I actually have him in quite a few of my best ball leagues as a late round flyer. I'm not ready to believe he's done. This guy was one of the best wide receivers in the league. Last year was just an injury, just took him out of the game. And everybody thinks he's washed up because he was injured and missed the season. Look, that happens to everybody. It happened to OBJ, and nobody's ready to throw him out yet. But I'm not ready to throw him out at all, especially with Baldwin out, going to miss it, who knows, 3 to 4 weeks here. He's going to be a red zone threat at the very least on this offense, just because he's the big guy that can go up, fight for those 50-50 balls, and Russell Wilson knows he could just toss it up there and let him go get it.
All right, I heard this question on the radio, so I'm not taking credit for it. And at first, when I heard it, I thought it was absurd. And the more I think about it, it's on the money. Who's the better quarterback in the National Football League? Tennessee Titans, Marcus Mariota, or Miami Dolphins, Ryan Tannehill? Brian, who's the better quarterback?
Jesus. At one point, 3-4 years ago, my Facebook profile picture was Marcus Mariota in an Eagles jersey, praying that Chip Kelly would make a big trade to get him in there. So I have a soft spot in my heart for Marcus Mariota, but he just sucks. I mean, he's just not – and I like the guy a lot. I loved him in Oregon, and I'm a big fan. I was going to buy a jersey and everything. But, God, between those two, Christ.
I say put them both in a dumpster and set it on fire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You know what? I'll take Ryan. That's where I'm taking Ryan Fitzpatrick. Give me Fitzmagic and the big stupid beard, and I'll play him.
Wow.
I mean, God, I guess if you have to go between the two, I'm trying to think who has
the only difference
weapons.
I can make between the two is Tannehill doesn't get hurt as often.
One quick update on Deshaun Jackson. Of course, he had concussion and a shoulder injury. Did not practice today. Jim, if Deshaun Jackson was unable to go this week, does Adam Humphries become viable off the waiver wire?
Oh, man, I don't know if it goes that deep, but that's definitely pushing it down a bit for me. I think Godwin becomes a big play. I think he sees more. I don't know if he sees enough.
Deshaun Jackson is going to do everything in his power to play against the Philadelphia Eagles, his former team this week. And every time he plays them, he scores. So if he plays and you want a DFS dart throw, put Deshaun Jackson in there. I don't know if his price went up much because of his big week last week, but he's going to try his damnedest to get on the field against the Eagles. And whoever's coming out of the slot against the Birds, they're either going to have rookie Avonte Maddox in there or second-year guy Sidney Jones, who's coming off that Achilles injury.
I don't think he's really ready yet, is he?
He's playing. No, he played for sure last week, but that's who's manning the slot. So you essentially have two rookies in there, and I know when Deshaun comes in, that's kind of where they're putting him, is in the slot. I really like Godwin. I picked him up as my first waiver priority this week in a couple of leagues because all of the focus is going to go over to Mike Evans. So Humphreys, no, I wouldn't play him. Godwin, yes, I would try to get him, and I think he's going to have a pretty good day and probably scores against Philly.
Great stuff. WTF Fantasy. Check us out every Wednesday night, 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. And if you don't catch it live, you can catch us on iTunes, catch us on YouTube. Great show. Before I leave tonight, though, I'm going to ask you guys one final question. One thing I always wondered about is great athletes. I love reading biographies. I love following people's stories. So, Brian, talking about people's stories and one of the greatest athletes of our time, at this point, do you think Caitlyn Jenner pees standing up or sitting down?
Well, you know what, though? If any of those daughters are hanging out, I'll come over to the house and investigate that myself if you want. But if I was him, I still stand up. Damn it. I'm standing there with my Olympic medal swinging into breeze.
Jim, do you have any medals that you want to brag about at this point?
No medals, but I will say this, folks. If you're out there listening to us, we appreciate it. We love you guys, but we will ask a favor. We'd like you to hit the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening to us or watching us on iTunes, please give us a rating, give us a comment, anything you can. Spread the word. We need to start getting this podcast out to more people. Just not enough people seeing us yet, so we need to get all the help we can get in getting us out there. So please help us out.
All right, Jim Day. Brian, great job. And, more and more people are passing these kind of laws instead of the gambling laws. So you can do what you want with these kind of things. But, Jim, sayonara.
Good night, Tony. Good night, Brian. Thanks all. And we'll talk to you guys next Wednesday.
Good luck in week 2, guys.